Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Monday, June 21st. I'm your host, Rod Bloom. Yes, we're recording on a Monday, kind of a rare occurrence for us here. This worked out best for myself and our guests, and I'm going to just bring these guys in. First, I'm going to bring in John Brown. John, how are things going?
Hey, Rod, things are going well. Thanks for having me back again.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this. Talking to you and to Dave or David Voorhees. Dave, how are things going for you?
Man, everything's going really good. Glad to be here.
Excellent. For those of you listening, got these guys in to talk some writing, first of all. We're going to talk some Browns too, but if you follow these guys on Twitter, John puts out a lot of, and we'll talk about John first. John puts out a lot of, I guess, poetry, first of all, on Twitter. John, do you still have your blog and do you still add to that?
Yeah, on occasion, I do. It just depends on if I if I think about it or if I remember. At any given time, I may put something on Twitter, or I might put it on Instagram. Sometimes I do add it to my blog. I'm pretty much scattered to the four corners in terms of social media and stuff, having it out there.
Yeah, so you still do that, and you've this really doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing right now, but I mean you're just a talented guy. So you've started doing stuff with photography not too long ago, and you're taking some great pictures, and you've got a site for that. So let's put that out there because I've got some of your stuff. I think it's great. It's I guess from what I remember, it's pretty much all beach kind of stuff. But excellent photographs, and you can get these. I got a T-shirt. My wife got a beach towel. Really cool stuff. So why don't you give out the information for that photography site? Because I think people should check it out.
Probably the easiest way for anybody to find me would be, I do have a Twitter account for that as well. And it's just J.R. Brown Photog, Photog. And I'll make sure that everybody gets that, after. But that has a link. It has a link to all my different social media, has a link to my actual personal website that has photography stuff, and it has a link to my store. That I'm constantly trying to put new material out there. And yes, as of right now, it is mostly just beach oriented items. Mostly beach sunsets, birds. Some of the different stuff. With a lot of the birds that we have down here in South Florida, pelicans and egrets and herons and some terns and things like that. So yeah, it was just something that I kind of fell into. I've been taking. I think we all just dabble with photography in some sense because we all have smartphones and it makes it easy. And so it was something I kind of started doing, and people started saying, hey, you've got a pretty good eye for this, or you capture that. And so I started doing it, and then I started finding out that it's pretty easy to capture certain things or to, edit things a certain way, and it's kind of, the way I explained it to my wife is I can take nature and use that as my canvas and then do something with it to put my, I guess you could say my touch on it, to give it just a different energy, or maybe to capture my emotion or my feeling, kind of like with writing in some aspects. And so it just became another form of expression. So, yeah.
I got to ask you, do you remember the picture on the shirt that I purchased? It's underneath of a pier.
Yeah, it's I took that standing underneath the Naples Pier as the sunset was going down, and I think I titled that one. I think I titled it "Light at the End of the Tunnel," if I remember correctly.
Okay.
That was a few months old. But and I'll be honest. I mean, the original photo is very nondescript. It's very it's almost monochrome. It's a very grayscale. It was kind of a cloudy day, and the sun was just kind of, it had a brightness to it. But I took that and I played with it and played with it and played with it, and then all of a sudden I just hit something, and I went, oh wow, I think that's what I'm looking for. That's, and that's kind of, I mean, in all honesty, that's kind of what I do with a lot of these. I mean, it's just I go with what feels right for that photo, depending on what's in the photo, whether it's a bird or whether it's the pier, whether it's the clouds, and not all of my, even though it's sunset, not all of my photos have the sun. And so it's just capturing what that photo feels like and how and what feels right to me when I try to capture the energy in a photo.
Well, we were under the pier in Venice, and it looked almost identical to that picture. That's what I was asking. So a lot of the piers
Nice.
probably look similar. I
Nice.
was just kind of wondering if it happened to be the same spot, because we took some pictures under that Venice pier, and they came out. They didn't look like yours, but they looked like the same pier.
Yeah,
So
it's probably
cool.
and it's probably a lot of the piers down here are probably built very similarly. It depends. I mean, now so a lot of my pictures are taken over by, what amounts to an old pier that is no longer there, and all that you have are the posts that are still sticking out of the water. You have the pilings, and that's where all the pelicans kind of gather and they hang out and that kind of thing. And so that I use that too, because you get depth in a photo, and you get a different sense of energy with the birds and some of these types of things when you add that to the photo.
Yeah, so let's move on to Dave. Dave Voorhees, you find him at Author Horror. That tells you a little bit about what Dave does.
A little bit.
Now Dave, you go by the Hound of Horror. So why don't you tell everybody where the Hound part comes from?
Well, actually, it first started out as the Hound of Bakersville, as a play on words for the Hound of the Baskervilles, which is my favorite Sherlock Holmes story. And then I just kind of evolved it into the Hound of Horror to kind of get away from the more Browns related, because I now do more writing and stuff like that on my Twitter. And I have a lot more writers that wouldn't understand Bakersville. What's that? So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So you have a book that's out, and that's The Feast and Other Horrifying Tales, and that's available on Amazon. You have a link on your Twitter account, right?
Yes, it's available on Amazon and Audible. There's an audio book on Audible. You can get it also through Amazon. Amazon has the paperback, and then actually you can get it on BarnesandNoble.com as well in hardback.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
You're just showing off now, Dave.
Yes, I am.
He's got a hardback book. Yeah, impressive. Well, guys, we're gonna get back into all that writing stuff, but before we do, let's talk about what we're drinking tonight. And I like to let the guests go first. So John, I know you're drinking something very interesting. Why don't you let us know what that is?
I think, to kind of, if you circle back to my Twitter handle, it's Dog Pound Surf, and that kind of, I'm a lifelong Browns fan going back to the early 70s, but I fell in love with surfing in, the mid 2000s, and I really cater to a lot of the things that capture the spirit of surfing and or Hawaii. And about 2011, 2012, I discovered Kona Brewing Company, and at that point in time, they had a coconut based beer that I really liked. But since then, I've kind of branched out into some of their other beers. But the one that I'm drinking tonight is Hanalei, which is a town in Kauai. But I'm drinking the Hanalei Island IPA, and it's light. It doesn't have a high alcohol by volume content, so I kind of like that. So it's kind of more of a refreshing beer. But it's made with passion fruit, guava, and orange. So but it's not too overpowering. It's not. I wouldn't really call it a fruity beer because it doesn't have that kind of flavor or that strength to it. But it's just a nice beer that kind of settles easy. It doesn't have a bitter aftertaste, and even though it's an IPA, it doesn't have that that bitterness a lot of times that you might get. So yeah, just a nice change of pace. It's a good beer, especially if you're a fruit person. You like fruit beer, you might like it. If you like IPAs, maybe not. But I think it's worth a try.
Actually, I had a Kona probably like a month ago. It wasn't an IPA though, and it was. I can't remember what the name of it was. It had a citrusy flavor to it though. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, they have one that's, I want to say, pineapple based, but they have like they have a wheat based one. I think that one's called Big Island. But then they have Lava Rock Pale Ale. They have a porter, and I can't remember what that one's called. But yeah, all of their beers are pretty good. And I will admit, you haven't really truly enjoyed or experienced their beer unless you've actually had it in Hawaii at the brewing company fresh on tap. That's when you actually truly enjoyed their beer.
Well, I think Dave would agree with me that I'm guessing that any drink probably tastes better in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Water tastes better in Hawaii. I mean,
Yeah, no kidding.
Everything's better in Hawaii.
Yeah.
that is
pretty safe bet.
Except for football.
Right. So Dave, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I am not much of a beer drinker like you guys. I do enjoy a brew every now and again, but tonight I went with a wine. It is a blueberry Moscato, which is a New World or what they call a cocktail wine. It's sweet. It's made by the Oliver Company, which means it's cheap. It's only about $8 a bottle.
All right.
And I'm drinking it out of my Cleveland Browns goblet that I had created about a year or so ago.
That goblet's sharp too. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm drinking straight out the bottle.
Yeah. Hey, as our friend Coach says, every man should have a goblet.
To drink wine out of.
Yeah, wine, beer, you can drink anything out of a goblet, man. It's a goblet.
That's right. Well, guys, I'm drinking, and this is from, I guess it's called Point Brewery. I guess it's Stevens Point Brewery. There's a story behind this, but this is a hazy Pebbles fruity hazy milkshake IPA. There's a lot going on with this beer. And the reason I went out to a store to try to find a milkshake beer because when I was down in Siesta Key, we went to a just a pizza place in Sarasota that had like 50 taps on the wall, and I went and got my little samples, and one of them was a strawberry milkshake beer, and I had never had a milkshake beer. And it tasted like strawberry milkshake with a little bit of beer in it. I thought it was really good. So I'm trying to find a milkshake beer that I like. And this really doesn't have the same milkshake flavor. I can taste the fruitiness to it, and I can taste that it's an IPA. It's a good beer, but it tastes different from that strawberry milkshake that I had down there, which I'll probably never find again. Because I realized when I was up there putting my little flight together, I was talking to another guy who was about my age, and he's like, we're comparing notes, and we're like, we're never going to remember what we even poured. And he said, well, my son was up here before, and he took his phone out and took pictures of the taps as he was filling the cups, Well, we weren't that smart, so I have no idea what beers I actually drank, but so I'm looking for that, but this is okay. I don't know. I see people tweet pictures to me about milkshake beers, and I just it's going to be a continuing effort to try to find one that I really like, guys. So, anyways, that was fun. Cool that we're all drinking something interesting and different, kind of like our writing, right?
Right.
Well, and not only that, I don't know if you noticed this, but I mean, each of us were drinking something fruit based. You got this strawberry thing going on, and Dave's got blueberry, and I've got like the passion fruit and guava. And
it's a good thing it's summer, or everybody be
weird
laughing
coincidence. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know
yeah.
about you guys, but it's 105. Well, it was like 105, 106 down here today, and it's still almost 100 degrees at 9:30 at night. So yeah.
We just hit 70, but I think it was in the 80s today, mid 80s.
I'm sitting at 64, so.
I think we're only going to be a high of 70 tomorrow. So yeah, it's going to be a nice day.
Be a nice day. 106 here.
Oh, you live in Florida.
Yeah, close to the sun.
So let's venture into this this topic of writing, and Dave, I'm gonna kind of start with you because John and I have talked on this podcast a little bit about writing. So, so our tales are a little bit told in some of these areas, but I kind of wanted to get from you kind of how you got started, where your interest, began, and how you got to where you are now, as far as having written a book, and I guess you're working on another one too, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So when did this all begin? Was writing that first book your first venture, or did you do some other things that kind of led up to that, or what?
Well, I've had ideas for stories since I was a kid. Growing up, I would like to do different backgrounds. What do they call it? I can't think of it, but where you change like a main character and you just change their history. So I would do that a lot. I would write stories like that for school and stuff like that. And I got into high school. I would start writing a little bit of my own stuff. And I've always ventured towards horror because I grew up watching horror ever since I was like a little kid. I would start with horror comedies like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, things like that, and then just graduated into your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Street. Like I said, I saw The Exorcist for the first time by myself when I was 6. Probably not a good idea, but it did anyways. So I've always kind of ventured closer to the horror side of things. I'd have nightmares just like everybody else, but then when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, I'd be like, that was cool.
Yeah.
Now, as I got older, I never really believed I was a very good writer. Actually, I even to this day, I tell people I'm not a good writer. I'm a good storyteller. I'm the technical part, make sure everything's spelled proper, periods and all that stuff, the punctuation's in the right places. That's why I say that's why you hire proofreaders. But I tell a good story. And for the longest time, I didn't think I'd ever be able to. And I started doing articles for Dog Pound Daily. Actually, I did a few articles for them. And I realized that I'm not going to be a sports reporter. I couldn't think of the stories. They were wanting like 2 stories a week. And I'm like, I just can't find them. I don't live in Cleveland. I live 3 hours away. So I was like, this isn't working out. So then I tried to be a reporter for Walpock Daily News, which Wapakoneta is a small town just south of where I'm at.
What town are you in, Dave?
I live in Columbus Grove, Ohio.
Okay.
Which is nowhere near Columbus.
No, well, I know where Wapak is, but yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm about 45 minutes north of Wapak. Roughly.
Okay.
So, yeah. So you kind of get an idea. North of Lima.
Yeah.
So,
well, I went to school in Defiance for a couple of years, so I know most of the little towns up in that area. I've at least heard most of the names, because a lot of the kids that went to school there went to all those little towns around that area.
Right. Well, I actually grew up in Elida, so kind of another small village just like this one.
Yeah.
But when I tell people I'm from Columbus Grove, they're like, oh, so you're by Columbus? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Nowhere near it. But like I said, working at the newspaper showed me that I could be a writer. Just newspaper wasn't where I was good at writing, because they had certain rules and I just didn't like to follow them.
Yep.
Yeah, so, AP. Nah, I don't get along with AP
style,
writing. Yeah.
So was working at that paper, is that when you first felt good enough, or comfortable maybe, that you felt confident in people seeing your stuff? And I'll ask the same thing to you, John. Because I know, John, you've done poetry and like song lyrics and things like this, but you probably did a lot of it before you showed anybody. So when did you guys each feel comfortable enough, or either comfortable or felt you were good enough, confident enough to share this with people, or thought that you had the ability?
Well, for me, it was the paper. That having people read my stuff every day, 2 or 3 articles a day, I got real comfortable with that. But it wasn't my stuff. It was just like, here's the news story and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to create, when I'm at work, I work at factories all the time, and I would tell stories while we were working to help kind of pass the time by. And I would share it with the people around me, and they loved it. So then I decided to sit down and write, and that's what I did. Starting with the feast title story.
Nice. So how about you, John?
It's for me, I started writing when I was little. And of course, back then it was primarily poetry. As a kid, you don't really think about things like song lyrics or capturing those different types of, you don't capture things in that sense. Because and I will admit, writing lyrics is different, is a little different than writing poetry in some aspects. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is I also think, and to kind of to Dave's point, being a storyteller, there are different aspects of that. And I think visually, in a lot of senses, because I'm I'm sure you guys know this, but I'm heavily a film guy. And of course, I went to college for theater and film. I've written screenplays. I've written 4, and in those different types of things. And so I think what starts to happen is, depending on the type of feedback, for me, it became a case of, I know this is going to sound weird, but words are words to me in the aspect, and it's just trying to capture what I feel and put it into the context that I need for a given scenario. So when I was in college and I'm and I'm having to write for my theater things, I had to learn how to put things into a context of telling a visual story. But when you're writing emotionally or from a feeling or whatever you may be thinking, it's trying to capture a different sentiment, and it becomes, in recent years, I've really tried to, I guess you could say, practice different ways or, different formats or different genres. But I never really felt uncomfortable with my writing. I mean, when I was in high school, I was the guy that was proofreading all my classmates' paperwork and to help them out and that kind of thing. But I guess the weird thing is, now that when I think about it, is my stepmother and I, after I lost my mom as a kid, my stepmother and I were always at odds. But the one thing that she always held me up to was, "You're such a phenomenal writer. You're such a great writer." It was the only thing that she would ever compliment me on. And I was like, she's like, "You should write, you should write, you should write." And so it was kind of, at that point in time, it became a case of, okay, I can start being more expressive. And it became a case of, when I was into the military, that's how I would express to people. That's, I'm, regularly every year, that's what I was doing for Christmas or birthdays, was I was sending my father, a poem or, those types of things. And in recent years, I just became more comfortable with it, in the sense, because I started being in bands. I started singing in bands and all these different types of things. And at that point in time, I think, plus once you get older, you really don't care.
Yeah, you're right. You don't.
That's a fact.
And so seriously, it became a case of, like, I really don't care what people think at this point. In that sense, it's more of a case of, I have something to say and I'll put it out. And I think the one thing that I think where I've gotten a lot of fulfillment, I would say over the last maybe 1 to 2 years, is I would put something on Twitter and someone would reply in the sense of, "Wow, this resonates with me," or "Wow, this made me see my own life in a different sense," or "I feel something differently now because of this." And that's when I think you're truly, for me, I always think of quote unquote art, whether that's, and Dave writes in a different style, but he impacts people. I can see that by their reactions. And I mean that good, I mean that in a good way.
I terrify people.
Well, no, and Dave, I mean, think about it. You get these reactions from people going, "Wow, this is awesome. I feel this," or "Oh, this is great. This is," and that's what good art does, is it makes people feel something. And so that's what encourages me to keep writing. And so, if I help someone, in terms of my writing, whether that's writing a poem that makes them look inside themselves differently or whatever the case may be, and they feel something differently and that helps them, then, I'm certainly encouraged to keep doing that.
Oh yeah. And I've read a lot of John's stuff, and I love it. It amazes me every time I read it. It's just great stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But what he's saying is so awesome, because each piece that he does, it's going to hit different people, and it's not about being good. I mean, what he writes is good. It's about the impact on people, and some of it really, I mean, I think each piece touches people in different ways, and it impacts them, and that's I would say that's what you're trying to do, but I don't think that's what you're trying to do. You write these things for you, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. In like, for me, sometimes I do, but I shouldn't say that. I should say about 95% of the time, yes, I'm probably writing for me. I won't. Now, there are times where I may write something for somebody else, but that tends to be a personal thing. Like obviously something that I would write. There are times where I'll write something about my wife and I'll put it online because I want people to see that or to understand what my thought process is or what I feel.
Yeah.
But I know that there are people on, right now, for example, we all have friends right now on Twitter that are struggling with things in real life.
Yes.
And some of them are struggling with things that I understand or have dealt with. And so I may reach out to them and talk to them on a personal level, or I may just try to write something because sometimes that's how I express easier. And so I may just try to write something and say, hey, don't lose sight of the big picture, and because I know, life gets the best of us at times. And I think we've all been there in some way, shape or form. I think this last year and a half has just been chaotic for all of us, but then the real life that has even happened inside of, the last year and a half, has gotten to us as well. And so that's the thing, I try to let these people know this is my way of showing you that I care, or that hopefully my words can help you in some form. And if they do, great, and that's where all you can do is just try to show people you care.
Yeah. I get John's point. I've wrote some poetry. I'm not much of a poet like him, but I have wrote some that were internal. But most of the time, my writing is just I try to scare myself.
Awesome.
It don't work. I end up laughing while I'm writing,
That's
but
awesome.
I actually do try to scare myself. If I can get the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up, I feel bad for everybody that's going to read it, because
you're going to catch them off guard.
Right.
Yeah.
And I said some of my stuff it takes turns. It's got twists in it sometimes. Sometimes it's straightforward. Some people, I don't think some people realize when they're reading it how dark it can get. And John knows, he's read some of my story, even like my newer story. It gets pretty dark.
Yeah. Guys, for me, just briefly, I never considered myself a writer. I never really wrote much anything. I'm talking up through high school. Nothing. Never. I don't really think I had an interest in it. Didn't think it was something I was really going to do. I just never really focused on it. I was a math guy and other stuff and numbers person. Numbers. I liked art and stuff and all this. So I've always kind of been a person that kind of odd things went. I could just get interested in whatever. But I think my senior year, we had in English, we had to, after doing the Shakespeare stuff, we had to write a sonnet. And I was the only one in the class who wrote an actual sonnet that qualified, that was 14 lines iambic pentameter, that fit the bill perfectly. And I thought, well, that kind of hit me a little bit, that I was able to do that. Nobody else was. And then actually at Defiance, I think my sophomore year, I took a British Lit class, which was supposedly the had the hardest professor, at the college. And I got I think an A and an A plus on a couple of papers. And I started thinking, well, maybe I can write. So, and I never really did anything with it, much. And I started writing some poetry, and I've written poetry on my own, but I never really explored writing until I started writing sports, probably about 5 years ago. So, I've got a whole catalog of old poetry that probably nobody would be interested in, but other than that, I'm still a work in progress.
It's funny though, Rod. I mean, because a lot of times, I think I don't. To your point, I don't really think of myself as a writer. And I had somebody the other day call me a Renaissance man, which I thought was interesting because yeah. and it kind of caught me off guard. It kind of caught me off guard because I always jokingly have said that about myself, and I always tell my wife, hey, I consider myself the last great Renaissance man, and that's actually not true, but I always used to jokingly say that.
It's tongue in cheek, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about it though is when I look, I'm always trying to see what I can do to make myself better, even though I don't quote unquote consider myself a writer per se. I always try to see how I can challenge myself. And to my point, I've written a book, though it sits in my email. And there's only a handful of people that have seen it. But there may be days where I hear somebody say something, a phrase, and I go, wow, I like that. And then I'll come home and I'll take that and bam, spit out a poem or songs. And there's been times where, my wife, Stephanie, she'll say something and there's a way that she puts something into words. And all of a sudden I go, whoa, that right there. And I'll take that. And next thing you know, I'll turn around and spit out a poem and send it to her and she'll be like, wow. And
that happens to me. Not as often. That happens to me.
And it's just trying to constantly challenge yourself. What can I do different here? Maybe it's just a word, maybe it's a phrase. Can I put this into something that means something? Can I use this in a way that becomes meaningful? I've built entire poems around a word or a phrase and things like that. And it allows me to keep trying to grow. And then it's just exploring different methods of writing, whether that's free form, structured poetry, lyrics. I took journalism in college and realized I hated it. And because it's structured and there is, like Dave said, there are rules. And whereas being a quote unquote artist, which is what I consider anything that makes somebody feel something, whether that's writing, painting, drawing, photography, or whatever. I think if you can continue to challenge those boundaries and challenge yourself, that's when you'll start to, make it hard. Make it hard on yourself. Push yourself to, like Dave said, he tries to scare himself. And so that challenges you to step up, to constantly step up and to improve how you're approaching things. And so, it makes it fun at times too. It makes it hard. I get frustrated. I get frustrated at times.
Yeah.
But
this the article that I just put out, I hadn't written anything for
a while.
I don't know, 2 or 3 months, and I felt like I shared this with a few people. I honestly wanted to write something. So
that's the one you posted on Facebook, correct?
Facebook. I post on Facebook, and on Twitter. Okay. But I put this article together. I wrote it from like 9:30 till 11 o'clock at night, I think on Wednesday night, and I'm thinking, I don't know if it's my best work. I just kind of had a few ideas. I put them down. I don't think I embarrassed myself, and people start telling me it was a great article, and I'm thinking, are they just being nice or what? And I don't want to keep asking people because then it just sounds like I'm asking people to tell me how great I am, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I consider myself a writer because I love to write, not because I'm this great person or some kind of finished product. I'm always looking to to improve, but I guess maybe I'm more of a critic of myself than some other people are. I guess the article
I understand that.
was pretty good. Honestly, I read it and I think it's okay.
That's how I feel about my books and all my stories.
And Rod, you said something there that kind of prompted a couple questions for you guys. So, you talked about if you're putting things out into this public forum, and like I said, I honestly really don't care what people think, and I'm always kind of humbled when people provide some of the praise that they do. Now, so when you put things out, do you go out there with a level of hesitancy, or do you go out there and then when people provide feedback, how trusting are you in the feedback that you're provided? That becomes a difficult thing to navigate, is what you're being, is just blowing sunshine? Are you just telling me what I want to hear, or are you giving me your honest feedback? And so those becomes the difficult things to navigate.
I think most people are just going to be nice, and I think a lot of people, just like for both of you guys, a lot of people like reading our stuff. Okay, a lot of people that know us are going to want to read something by us and say, "Hey, that was great," because they know that we put work into it. Great job. But there are people that I trust to give me honest feedback, and I'll be honest. Most of the time, what people are telling me is actually true. So if people don't respond with a great article or whatever, then that means it was probably pretty average, So, which happens sometimes, It's just how it is.
And then I guess my follow-up question there would be, you talked about the other night, you said when you sat down and wrote between 9:30 and 11, and so I'm curious, do you guys have a period of time where you write more, or that you feel like you write better, or do you sit down and just say, okay, I'm going to try to write something now, or how do you guys approach that?
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. Usually for me, like with the little Twitter stories that I put out, it's whenever something pops in my head, I just start writing it out. And I do it that way so I don't get self-conscious about it and not send it out. Because if I was to sit there and write that, right? If I was to write that on my Microsoft Word, it may never see the light of day. So I do it on Twitter just like that. But that's why you get all the misspellings, is because I try to get it out as quick as I can. Then I'll go through, copy it, put it on Microsoft Word, fix it, and stuff like that. But I try to get it out as quickly as I can, so I don't hold anything back.
Right.
Now, as far as how do I come up with, I don't know if I even come up with anything. I just close my eyes, I see stuff, and I write what I see and I hear. So it's like I'm looking into another dimension or another world, and I'm just reporting to you what I see and hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, when I'm really in the groove, John, and writing an article or two a week, I get an idea, and I almost let it stew for a day or so. And by the time I sit down to write it, I almost write the whole thing in about a half hour. Because it's written itself by then. I know exactly what I'm going to say.
I do that with my books. With the stories that are in my books, I am constantly thinking about those for months before I even start writing. But my little stories, the ones I pop out, I just pop them out, and I got to get them out quick.
It's funny for me, because there will be times where, a good example is like the other night, I went to the beach, I took some pictures, and I get. And anybody that knows me knows that when I'm near the water, that starts to resonate with me in a different way than being around anything else. But I'm coming home.
I know that.
And so I'm coming home, and all of a sudden something pops into my head, and I'm like, and all of a sudden words start to flow. And I remember the other night, I came through the front door. I'm like, I gotta write. And my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I got stuff going on in my head, and it's getting that, and it's trying to capture lightning in a bottle, so to speak. And now
Yeah.
And that may never even see the light of day. And I may write it down, and and I may come up with something, and I may not even like it, but I have to capture it. The weird thing is for me is at night, my brain is so hyperactive. There will be times where I fall asleep with things in my head, and it'll wake me up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I have to write it. And it becomes a case of sometimes that's when I'm writing a poem at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning to capture that peace, that energy, that feeling or emotion. And then the other thing there is very rarely, almost never do I rewrite anything. Everything that I spit out is when it comes out in its rawest form. And I never rewrite. I never go back and revisit and change, correct, any of that. Anything that anybody sees of my work that's how it came out.
When I write poetry, it almost never changes. And I've done the same thing, John. I've woken up at night with 2 or 4 lines of a poem in my head.
Yeah. Well, that's how that poem, Dogs Gotta Eat, when I wrote that Browns poem, I was middle of the night, and it just kind of like came to me and just started flowing, so I popped it out.
And it's funny too, because a lot of, I once had a friend of mine who's also a writer, she lives in Newark outside of Columbus, but she used to ask me one day, she asked me one time, she goes, what is your revision process? And I go, I don't have one. And she goes, wait, she goes, what do you mean? She goes, I said, anything that you see, I've written it once and that's it. And she goes, how? And I go, that's just how it comes out. And the reason, and I've always had a reason for that I don't go back and reread it and change it, is because what I think you get in the first draft is the truest, purest, rawest feeling that you could get, at least in my context, obviously, because I write from emotion. I'm writing feelings and thoughts. And so whether it's anger, sadness, happiness, whatever that feeling may be, when it comes out that first time, that is in its truest form. And to try to go back and change it, you have now completely altered the feeling. And so that's why I stay away from it.
Yeah, I don't really revise much. Now, like with my first book, I didn't revise anything. And I've gone over it a few times, and I think, man, if I would have just added this here or that there. Now with this new book, Sundown, which is a story John and a few people have read, that's going to be in my new book. That one I sent out to a few people. I had questions with it, and that feedback, I went back into the story itself, and it didn't change the story, but it just added a little bit of background to it, just so it gives a little bit more, gets you more familiar with the characters and their motives and things like that. I didn't want to change the overall story, because if you change the overall story, I think the story is perfect as it is. I just wanted to give a little more background, but that's all I've ever done. That's the most revision I've ever done on anything.
And and even though I'm lucky enough to having read it already, I think the people that get to read it when it finally gets to come out are going to be very surprised and happy with that finished product. I mean, right. Out of everything I've read of yours, Dave, that I was kind of blown away by it in terms of, I mean, certainly the content and things like that, but I thought from an overall story standpoint and what you brought to the table with that one, I think that was just a really, really, I mean, high quality, strong story. I was really impressed with it, and I truly wholeheartedly mean that. So yeah, I think people will be really happy with that.
Nice.
So far, it's gotten good. Everybody that's read it has loved it, so I'm really happy with that.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I wouldn't advise this for other people who write sports columns, but I rarely go back and make major changes to my columns. I write, and I typically take a while. If I'm at a point where I've got the whole thing written in my head, great. But if I'm sitting down to write something, I just have an idea pop in. I'm pretty methodical as I'm writing, and I don't go back and change much. I go back and check for spelling errors and structure and things like that. But I pretty much, the way I put it down on paper, it doesn't change very often. So first draft is pretty much what gets published every time.
Yeah, I don't know how people do that first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth draft. It's like, Jesus, write the dang thing already.
Well, I think for some people, you're writing down a bunch of ideas and trying, an outline and all this stuff. And some people need to do that. And if you need to do that to get yourself, the right structure and to get things together and everything, then you should definitely do that when you're writing.
I tried the outline. I couldn't do it. It just didn't work for me. The most I'll do now is if I'm doing like a long story, I'll write down the characters' names and I'll write down kind of like a little bit about them just so I don't get lost. Because sometimes you get like you'll start writing something like, oh, wait a minute, that contradicts what I said earlier. So I have to fix that.
Yeah. Kind of a little key for what your characters are. Yeah.
But most times it's like I see the characters are in my head. It's almost like I'm watching a movie and it just plays out usually pretty perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of goals do you guys have in the future with your writing? What do you think, John?
Wow. I've been hearing for, I don't know, if you go back to the 90s, I've been having people tell me I should get my stuff published. But I went down that path for a period of time where I looked, and there, from a standpoint of writing, whether that's poetry or those types of things, there doesn't seem to be a lot of, I guess I think there's the self-satisfaction aspect of it to say that you accomplished it. But if you're certainly looking to do it for any kind of monetary windfall, if you're looking for any kind of monetary windfall, that ain't happening. But I kind of look at it, and now recently I did have an idea of that. Since I've started doing photography, I've in the back of my head I've started flirting with the idea of putting together a photography book and then writing poems based around those photographs. So if I go out here to the water and take a certain sunset, photo, what does that photo make me feel? And then writing the poem that goes with that and putting something like that into a book perhaps, or some things like that. I mean, I've even done weird stuff in the past when I was back in my band days, we wrote originals and we were using my lyrics and things like that. I even took some of my lyrics and put them on the back of t-shirts, stuff like that. And I've even flirted with the idea of the whole apparel aspect of things. And so I was actually very happy that you chose to put one of my pictures on a shirt, Rod. So
I thought it looks great. Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And so thank you very much. So, I don't know. If you ask me this question again tomorrow, my answer would probably be different. So, I don't know. I'm just, to quote my buddy Indiana Jones, I'm making this up as I go along. I'm just kind of winging it.
For me, I'm hoping to someday be a full-time writer. I don't expect to be like Stephen King level multi-billionaire type person. If I could make what I make working in a factory writing, I'd be happy. And it's not very much, I tell you that much.
Dave, your stuff reminds me more of like Clive Barker.
Yeah. Clive Barker, Edgar Allan Poe, a little bit darker than King.
Yeah. I don't. I'm trying to think of Poe's stuff always had that psychological aspect where yours just is, I wouldn't say graphic, but yours just deals with a different approach to delivering the story that just is, for me, is very reminiscent of Clive Barker.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see what you're saying there. Yeah. I could get a little graphic at times. I'm not going to shy away from that at all, but I also don't really do happy endings. I just follow where the story goes.
I'm trying to think of something you've written that has that, and I'm sitting there going,
I can't think of anything I've written that has a happy ending myself.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I think the doll kind of had a happy ending because the dude got rid of the damn thing.
Jonathan, yes, the story Jonathan, he got rid of it. So it kind of has a happy. It's more of a continuing story. It doesn't really end.
Nobody died in that, didn't they?
Yes, actually, one character died in that.
Oh, one person.
Somebody
Okay.
died
I
from
couldn't
all
remember.
stuff.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
The Easter story kind of ended a little happy. It's probably the happiest ending I have is the Easter story in my book.
The Easter story ended a little hoppy. Oh, happy.
Hoppy. Yeah.
A little happy. Sorry.
Hoppy
I had to
Easter.
go with a bad play on words. Sorry.
Yeah, a little hoppy. That's like I said. That's probably the happiest ending or hoppiest ending of any of my stories, because at least two of the characters survived.
Nice.
Is that how we're measuring the happy endings in your stories? Is by how many people are still left?
Alive versus dead quotient. Yeah, let's figure that
I'm
out.
trying to compete with Friday the 13th movies on body count. So
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much with John. I kind of my goals kind of shift and stuff. I really just want to continue to become a better and better writer. Hopefully, it's kind of the goal. And I kind of shift between being happy writing sports stuff to, wishing I wrote more poetry to thinking I should try writing a book someday. I've actually started writing 2 different books, and they're sitting in my Google stuff somewhere. I've got like 50 or 60 pages of one written, and I don't know if I'll ever get back to it. So
did that.
yeah. So,
I got 3
I don't know.
novels sitting there just doing nothing.
Yeah, I get ideas and stuff, and I'm like, man, it'll take me a while to do that. So I don't know if I want to do that. I'll just keep doing the articles and blah.
And that's kind of and that's kind of how especially with photography kind of became an outlet too. Right. And I think I think there's a possibility that I have a greater potential there for doing something from a long-term standpoint of from a career perspective of as I continue to work and hone that craft. It is harder work. I will say that it's understanding your camera and settings and lenses and lighting and all of these different aspects of things that. Whereas for me, if I write, I just throw a bunch of words together, and so
that's more natural. You've been doing it longer, yeah, too.
Yeah, and I think that the potential for the crossover aspect of things is there as well.
I'm seeing a coffee table book in the future.
And it's funny too. The other day, my wife said something, and she goes, not only from certainly from a photography standpoint. I love being around the water, obviously, but she always tells me, she goes, when you write about the ocean and she goes, and the water, she goes, it's completely different. She goes, go back and read everything that you've written about the water versus when you write about anything else. And she said it's just at a different level. And it's just, she goes, you use different words and different phrasings, and it's more poetic, and it's more, she goes, you just write in a way that's more emotional for you. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, being around the ocean just resonates with me in a way that not a lot of other stuff does. And so, and I try to capture that. And as long as I'm making other people feel that, that's the end goal. I think that, you talk about goals, Rod. I think if I can continue to make people feel happy, or if I continue to help people, or that they appreciate, my whether it's my writing or my photography, then that's what I want at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. So you guys ready to talk a little bit of Browns?
Sure.
Dog pound.
A little bit.
Let's go Browns.
So let's do this. This is Dave's first appearance on the podcast, and we'd like to give guests a chance to talk about their journey as a Browns fan. So Dave, tell us about how you became a Browns fan and a little bit about your story as being a Browns fan, favorite players, memories, anything you want to share.
Well, let's see. Well, let me start off by saying my parents divorced when I was a year old. And me and my dad never really had a whole lot in common all growing up. So when I'd go over to his house on weekends, we'd watch Buckeyes and Browns games. And that's kind of how we connected first. We're good friends now. We have a lot more in common than I ever thought we did back then. Because he's actually a really good storyteller in his own right. He just doesn't ever write nothing, or will never write nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He, I grew up watching the games with him and learning from him, and that's how we connected during when I was a kid. So I mean, I'd see him one weekend or 2 weekends a month, a couple weeks in the summer, and that's just how we got together. It was the only thing we had in common the entire time growing up. At least it seemed that way. So that's how I kind of got into it. I remember watching the games with my dad, him talking about how, Bernie did this or why he did that, and Bernie Kosar is one of my favorite Browns players of all time. I was ecstatic when he followed me on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I remember watching Eric Metcalf running the returns back for touchdowns against the Steelers. Josh Cribbs is one of my favorites, even though he played during a very bad time. I wish we had Cribbs on this team.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
I will say this. I watched that Demerick Felton. I watched some of his highlights on kick returns and stuff. He runs a lot similar to Cribbs. He might be a little bit faster, but he actually runs. His style of running is very similar when I watched him doing returns. So I was like, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Josh Cribbs. Don't put words in my mouth. I just say the style is similar. But yeah, I loved watching Ozzie. I loved watching Bernie, Biner. I loved all those guys. And I remember watching the drive about crushed me. I think it crushed everybody. I fortunately was in the Navy when the move happened. So I didn't even hear about it until like 2 weeks after it was announced. I'm like, what?
Oh, that was good.
Yeah. By the time I heard about it, everybody was still pissed, but it was like pretty much they've accepted the fact that it's going to happen in a way. So I was out at sea and everything, so I had no idea until I got back. I remember actually watching, I think it was in '94 Dallas versus the Browns. I watched it on board the ship. That was the last Browns game I got to see before they moved until their return in '99. So that's it. I mean, I just connected with my dad, and now I'm like a huge fan, and I get together with my kids and watch it, and I try to turn them into big fans. Like my daughter hates football, but she loves the Browns.
Nice.
So she'll root for the Browns, but she won't watch them.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So, guys, it's been, minicamp just finished last week. So, you guys have any thoughts on minicamp? Anything you saw there, John? Anything you want to bring up about minicamp, or got a couple other things we can talk about otherwise?
I think kind of we had kind of talked about it a little bit offline, but a lot of the drama, and I think we're all kind of starved right now for just some things taking place, and so we're kind of creating a little bit of drama out there, in the Twitterverse. But I think there's a lot of good things happening with this team, and I think we all sense that, and I think that's why we're all hungry. I think we're all ready for the season. I mean, we just come off the best season in I don't know, an eternity.
Long time.
Yeah, and so, and I think you can look at this team and say, what's the window of opportunity? I mean, what's going to take place on the offensive side? You've got, Nick Chubb and a lot of these people that, and of course, Baker and all these people that they're going to have to, try to fit into the salary cap, and of course, let's not even go down the Jarvis Landry OBJ path. We don't want to raise everybody's hackles on that one. But then you look at what this team did in the offseason, not only from a free agency standpoint with Johnson and Hill and Takker McKinley and Jackson and all these bodies that they brought in, and then to go into the draft. And everybody's like, okay, who do we want? And there was all the debate back and forth. We all have our preferences, and of course we get Newsome. But then to get into the second round and get Joke, I think it was at that point in time we were all like, oh wow, Now, what we can start doing some things now, and you look at the fact that they brought in Walker, and they made some changes to the linebacking core. They went and added some speed with Schwartz. We'll see how that plays out. But this, not only the regime from a front office standpoint, but this team feels different. And you know what? I love that the national media and everybody else and all the other fans in the NFL hate Baker Mayfield.
That's great.
Keep going. Just keep pouring gasoline on the fire. I am all for it.
Baker plays better.
Oh, yeah.
He plays better that way.
And not only that, I mean, the last time I checked, there ain't no QB out there that's perfect. Not one. And you can run down whether it's Tom Brady all the way back to Joe Montana or whoever you want to throw in between. But Bake he fits Cleveland. He wanted to be here. He's played with a passion. He's been through so much change and chaos and upheaval, and he's still come out and he's a leader. And that's what we want. And we've got the Myles Garretts of the world on this team and the Denzel Wards and these other guys that help balance that dynamic out. Is Baker brash and does he speak his mind? Oh yeah. But I'm all for it. He says what the rest of us are thinking. And this team right now just has so much chemistry and energy. I mean, it's like a volcano just waiting to erupt. And we're all going to be excited to be there cheering loudly when it happens. I mean, that's kind of been my feeling. I've just kind of sat back this offseason and watched a lot of it. It's been kind of funny, some of it, watching Twitterverse trying to, the Browns Twitter trying to cannibalize itself. But, but I think at the end of the day, when football season hits, we can look good on paper. It's all about playing between the lines and we'll see what happens and cross our fingers and pray that at the end of the season that we're the last one standing. But I think that there's a Super Bowl in the near future. I truly do. Whether that's this, not necessarily this season, but I think in the upcoming years and in the next, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, I think they're at the doorstep. I truly do. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree with that. To further John's point about the drama, I think part of the fans' problem is we're still on hangover from 2006 when we had a good season, then it fell apart the next year, and everybody's scared that's going to happen again this year. So they're like, hey, let's trade all away these guys and try to get these guys who we think may be better, just because they're afraid they're waiting for the shoe to drop, and they're just scared it's going to happen because it did in 2007 or 2008 and 2009.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that you'll find about Browns fans is it doesn't, especially the most recent, the most recent incarnation. So if you go back to 1999, we are the eternal optimists of the NFL.
Yes.
We went 0-16, we went 1-15, and it didn't matter. We kept changing coaches and players, and the next year we were going to go 12-4. And we're, and so we were constantly, we're constantly like, hey, that season's in the rear view. And of course, we went with when Freddie took over as coach, and there was all this, we got all this hype and we got all this, media attention, and we went out and fell flat on our face.
I was so rooting for Freddie.
And then of course we changed regimes like weekly. And I can't even keep track of it anymore. But we as Browns fans, we want to continue to believe that this is it. This is the year.
Yep.
And then there's a reason that the team motto is waiting for next year. There's always next year. I mean, that's because that's who we are. That's our personality now.
Well, that's why what you said is so important, John, that you feel there's a Super Bowl on the horizon, essentially in the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, that people have to forget about this idea of this has to be the year, that we're always trying to win the whole thing this season. Okay, the goal for this franchise is to be competitive every season.
Right.
And if you're competitive every season, you're going to win sometimes.
There are people out there that are Super Bowl or bust. If they don't make it or win the Super Bowl, it's a failed season. And it's like, how can you say that? Super Bowl is not something that's easy to do. If it was easy to do, then all 32 teams would have done it multiple times already.
This team's made the playoffs twice since since they came back. I mean, you kidding me? If they make the playoffs, that it was a bad season. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to be happy if they make the playoffs and lose their first game, but I'm not going to go around crying if this team goes, if this team goes 12-5 and gets beat in the first playoff game by a hot team. It happens in football. It just does. I mean, football is about being fortunate enough to be healthy enough at the end of the season and hopefully to be rolling and it's about the matchups of who you have to play and stuff too. It's not just about we got this great team together now, we should win a Super Bowl. It doesn't work that way.
Nope. And there's that whole aspect of any given Sunday. I mean, and there are so many things that come into play when they lace it up and go out and get out on the field. I mean, a good example is, yes, we almost beat Kansas City. You could make an argument we probably should have beat Kansas City. I mean, but then there's people who want to spin that narrative and say, well, it's because they played only half the game with Mahomes or this or that. And I'm like, whoa, last time I checked, nobody felt sorry for us when half our team was in the hospital or when the Jets game where they had to put people out on the field with name tags on the front of their jersey because our wide receiver room, nobody knew who they were. Nobody's feeling sorry for us. So why should we feel sorry for anybody else? I mean, and so there's that aspect of on any given Sunday, you lace it up and you get out there and play. And I think when you look at this organization and this team, I don't want anybody feeling sorry for us. And do I realize that we've been the butt of many jokes over the last 20 some odd years? Yeah, I'm fully aware of that. But at the same point in time,
many might be an understatement.
Oh yeah, I mean, it became popular. It became popular culture. My wife was watching a TV comedy. I think it's called, I don't know. I think it might be Hot in Cleveland. I'm not sure, but it's got like Valerie Bertinelli and Betty White, and they were making fun of the Cleveland Browns. I'm like, okay, this is getting old.
Tim Allen was doing it on Last Man Standing. He's done a few Browns jokes. And when you look at it at the same point in time, I don't even want it to be about just this year, or I want it to be about this team being consistently good the way that they used to be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And
I think we lost John again.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if this team did good enough last season that they're not going to be looked at by other teams as being the joke anymore. So if that's the case, then we shouldn't have to put up with, the Cleveland jokes, about the Browns and everything. So, it really shouldn't be an issue. You can't have both worlds. You can't hate the Browns for being good and still make fun of them.
And they still try. I mean, like, I think it was one of the national media shows, they brought up the Jets game saying, oh, well, look how bad Baker played in that game. And they don't even talk about how we didn't have any wide receivers that Baker had thrown a pass to all year, or that the first time he threw a pass to him was in a parking garage.
Yeah.
No, it's just Baker didn't play well that game. That's why they lost. No, that's
it's not just the national media, but the fans. They want to make fun, and what they want to do is they say, okay, that's the real Cleveland Browns. But then we go out and whoop Pittsburgh's butt up and down the field in Pittsburgh for the playoffs. People don't talk about that. Well, the Browns fans do, but nobody else does.
Well, or they make excuses for Pittsburgh.
Yep.
The first game it was, they didn't play their starters. That's why you won. Then the second game, but we gifted you that game. We beat you. That's.
People tend to forget that we had a football franchise before 1999,
right?
And or that they were consistently good, or that we used to own the rivalry against Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and a lot of these other teams that have since owned us, so to speak.
Yeah.
But So yeah,
Yeah.
it's but that's the thing is it's put up or shut up. At this point in time, this team needs to go out and consistently win on the football field, go out and win playoff games on a consistent basis, go out and win meaningful games, whether that's whether that's winning all your division games or winning the division or however you want to look at that, putting that kind of success on the field on a consistent basis. Do I think that they have the regime in place to do that? Yes, I do. And I think that, Stefanski, I think in 1 year, I think he proved that he may be the guy. I think he may have proved that.
I'm pretty comfortable. If Stefanski's here for the next 10 years, I'll be happy.
I'm comfortable with the whole trio, the Podesta, Barry, Stefanski. If they can keep those guys together for a long time, we're going to have a winning franchise probably almost every year, if not every year.
I agree.
Speak to John's point, like a lot of people who say that, forget about the franchise before 99, they associate, a lot of them say, well, that's the Ravens history. And I'm like, no, it's not. The NFL says it's not. Well, the NFL can say what they want. That's just what really happened. No, the NFL, it's their league. They told you what really happened.
Yeah.
And it kills me.
So who do you guys feel most comfortable with as far as who's going to be extended between Baker, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb? I'll even throw Wyatt Teller in there if you want to talk about him.
Honestly, I think they're going to do all of them. I think Barry's going to find a way to get them all done. You're going to have a big jump in the cap next year. I think you'll see Chubb probably be the first one, just because him and Teller will probably be the first two to go to get the contracts, because their ends sooner. Like, you can push Baker's and Ward's off till next year if you really wanted to. But I think they're going to get them all done with the big jump in the salary cap and what they're doing, the way they're doing it. I think you're going to start seeing guys like, and as much as I hate saying it, OBJ, Landry, and some of your higher paid guys, they're going to start replacing them with draft like Schwartz and DPJ. And those guys are going to start kind of pushing those other guys out. And that's how you're going to keep your core of Myles Garrett and your Nick Chubbs and your Denzel Ward and your Baker Mayfields, and keep those guys paid, is to rotate the rest of them, just like how most of the other teams do.
Okay, so you think they'll sign all four and reduce payroll in some other spots?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think, John?
Dave kind of stole my thunder. I was going to actually make a joke. I was going to make a joke about trading and and Landry just to piss off the fan base. But no, I think when you do look at what they currently have, and to Dave's point, yes, the salary cap will go up, and then as you start to adjust, the guys that, when you look at it from a standpoint of whether that's a Jarvis Landry or any of these types of guys, if they want to be here, and I think they understand. I mean, they all know it's a business, but if you're happy someplace and you're already making enough money, do you take the pay cut? Do you help the team out? There are those types of factors that sometimes we see that sometimes. You don't see it all the time, but there are those types of things. At the same point in time, God, you've got a lot of money tied up in that wide receiver room.
Yeah.
So that becomes, do you let one of those guys go, and that's the money that you give to Denzel Ward? Or to Nick Chubb, it's Nick Chubb this year. And then the big one becomes obviously Baker. And I think a lot of us, I mean, I know there are people out there, even in the Browns fan base, that don't like him, don't want him. But if you decide that he is your franchise quarterback, you are looking at paying him $40 million a year, roughly. I mean, that's what a lot of these top quarterbacks are making now. And so you have to now say, okay, let's look at fitting all of these giant salaries. We're already paying Myles $25 million, I think.
Yeah.
You're gonna be if you decide that Denzel is your lockdown corner, you're paying him 14, 15.
Yeah, it's in that range. Yeah.
And Nick Chubb's 12 or 13 probably. And we would, and amongst us, we may sit there and say that we think Nick is the greatest running back in the league. And I think from a pure running back standpoint, I do believe that. Yeah. But is he the best all-around running back? Does he give you the best chance for success in the, and so you have to start to weigh those types of things. But does that put him into the top 4 or 5 tier of running backs and how much money they make? So that's a lot of money that they need to sort out.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I think that they do decide to pull the trigger on Baker, and hopefully, maybe they work some wonders with math and cap, and getting all the cap magic worked out. But it's going to be interesting to see how all this comes together in the next 18 to 24 months.
I agree. I think Baker will happen for sure. I just have a feeling they'll find a way to keep Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb will end up taking a little bit less than what everybody thinks.
I could see that.
Yeah,
yep, I could see that.
Just because he wants to be here, he loves playing with Kareem, he loves being in Cleveland. I mean, he's not going to sign for $8 million a year, but he's I could see him taking closer to 10 than rather than than 13 or 14, which might be what the market would say. And then
if there's one guy on the team that we could all agree on, everybody in the fan base 100% could agree as a team guy, it is Nick Chubb.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, so I hope they get that done, but I think I think you almost have to keep Baker just because. I mean, how long's it been since we've had a damn quarterback in Cleveland?
Quarterbacks are not a dime a dozen.
No, you cannot let a good quarterback.
Well, I don't know with that GM on the Get Up in the morning show, the Mike Greenberg show, Mike Finnenbaum or whatever his name is, and he's talking about he wouldn't re-sign Baker. He would go out and find another quarterback with his skill set. I'm like, where?
Oh, it's so easy. Yeah, I mean, we only went through 75 guys before we found Baker.
Exactly. It was like, they try to compare him to Tannehill, and Tannehill's a fine quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but it's not like every team in the league has a good quarterback.
No, they don't.
Well, and Tannehill had that resurgence in Tennessee, and how much of that is attributed to Derrick Henry? I mean, when you have a guy that's a beast like that in the backfield, does that make it easier for the quarterback, or does the passing game make it easier for the running back? There's that whole argument. But I mean, when you look at Baker's numbers. So in the 4 years that we have watched him, he didn't even play the first or his whole rookie season. He played 12 and a half games, basically 13 games.
Yeah.
And had a strong rookie season. Yes, he had that sophomore nightmare, so to speak. But I mean, all the coaching change, all the coaching change, all the offensive upheaval, and all of that. And then to bounce back last year and to put together a good year and down. I think the one thing I look at with Baker is he started the season last year, and there were some struggles, and you can make an argument, was he forcing the ball to OBJ? And then we run down all of those ridiculous arguments. But then down the last half of the season, he looked pretty damn good, and he played well in the playoffs.
Well, a lot of that attributes to just him finally getting comfortable in the system.
I think that's some of it, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, that's his, fourth system in 3 years?
Absolutely.
So he was just finally getting comfortable with it, learning it, getting his timing right with his receivers, getting comfortable with them. And
look at just this last week, kind of to go back to touch on minicamp, Baker looked leaned up. It looked like he put in the effort in the offseason. It looked like, because everybody was whining and crying, I'll say it nicely, whining and crying about the fact he's spending too much time making commercials, and why is he doing this, and why is he over there and doing that? He's putting in the work. He's put, and yet he still had a good season last year. But now this year, he put in the offseason work. He put in the physical work. He looks like he's leaned up. He looks like he's, and the funny thing is, it could be game 1, it could be game 17. He could go out and have one bad game, and people are gonna be like, okay, we need to trade that SOB. And it's and that's kind of where we're at.
Who's the backup? Yeah, who's the backup? Who can we have out there instead?
And the day that they sign Baker to that contract extension, I just want to see how many heads explode. That's what I'm looking. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm watching for.
Well, the commercial argument cracks me up because they act like he was gone for 4 or 5 months filming a movie. It probably took him a week to 2 weeks to film every commercial he made.
Yeah.
It's a 30-second spot. It doesn't take that long to film it. I mean, you'll contest
and they
that,
are good
John.
commercials. So
They
I
are.
will
They're
give
hilarious.
them that.
But they don't
That's the
take
important thing.
Yeah. They don't take, 2 months to film a 30-second spot.
So I was this was in last year when I was living up in Daytona. I was at the gas station. I'm wearing all, it's one of the, Sunday, and I've got all my Browns gear on. And this guy stopped me. He goes, hey, who you guys playing today? And I was talking to him, and he goes, yeah, man, I'm pulling for you guys. It's great to see the Browns doing well. And your quarterback makes the best commercials in the league. And I bust out laughing. I was like, yeah,
that's why we have him.
Yeah, I'm like,
the next Peyton Manning of
that's why they
commercials.
signed him. That's why they signed him, because he makes good commercials.
Yeah.
So
like I
guys,
said,
who
Baker wants to be here. Baker wants to be a Cleveland Brown, and that into itself.
That's important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, guys, who has the biggest impact? If you rank these three guys for me, who has the biggest impact this year coming back off their injuries? Between OBJ, Greedy, and Grant Delpit.
John, I'll let you go first.
Oh, man. I'm going to say, number one, I'm going to say Grant Delpit. They let Sendejo go, obviously, who he was the target of a lot of venom last year. Some of it, yeah, right. I'd say most of it probably rightfully deserved. Greedy, it's going to be interesting to see what happens if we even get him onto the field. I mean, we drafted Newsom. They got Hill and Johnson and these guys. So it's and now that I circle back to Delpit, I mean, they brought in, all this. They brought in, Johnson, and of course, we've got Harrison. So
Johnson, Harrison, and Redwine too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think Redwine's the odd man out. So I think you're looking at a starting tandem of probably Johnson and Harrison, unless Delpit just lights it up in training camp.
Oh.
But I think he can come in and make an impact. And of course, it remains to see what happens with OBJ. I mean, it looks like he's healthy, and if he's fully healthy, if he's even part of who he could be, do we circle back to that whole thing with the offense? And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to say Delpit 1. I'm going to say OBJ 2, and Greedy's just a question mark. I'm going to put him at 3.
I agree totally with John. That's exactly how I would put it. I think you're right. I think you'll see Harrison and Johnson start as the safeties, but I think you'll see Grant Delpit play that third linebacker spot a lot. I also think you'll see where like Delpit will line up in the third linebacker spot, but then he'll drop into safety, and like Harrison or somebody will come up and take over to confuse the quarterbacks and stuff. There's so much you can do with this. You might even be able to see that from JOK sometimes, where he might drop back and play a little safety and have the safety come up into the box. There's just so many things that they're going to be able to do with this defense. It's going to be crazy. You're never going to know who's coming from where or who's covering what. The only thing you'll know is Ward's over here, and I'm going to think, honestly, I think Newsom's going to be the starter on the other side of Ward.
Yeah, I think so too.
You guys think he's going to start as a rookie?
I do.
Well, they started Greedy. They started Greedy for a period of time, but they also started, Ward, and Newsom. Newsom comes highly rated.
I think they're going to be careful with Greedy, because with that injury, if it flares up again, if he gets hit just right again.
Yeah, when you talk nerve damage, that becomes a dangerous thing to dance around.
So I think that's why I think it's going to be Newsom mostly, because you don't want Greedy out there and then just get hurt and be lost for the whole season again. And I think you'll see him rotate in. And
Rod, actually, I'm going to kind of circle back to mine really quick. You know what? The more that I thought about it now, because I think Delpit will be probably, coming. He won't be starting. So I forgot that we brought in some free agent, we brought in some free agent talent. And so that it's pretty deep back there. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think when you look at OBJ, And you talk about if he comes back and he's healthy, that's the other thing. These guys are all, I mean, if we assume that they're fully healthy, if you talk a fully healthy OBJ, we all know what his impact can be. I mean, it wasn't, I remember last year he almost, 3 touchdowns in the Dallas game, he rescued us. And granted that was early in the season, and so where do they fit him into the offense, that kind of thing. But I would like to think that if he's healthy, he's starting. His potential impact is always going to be, because he's OBJ. We know what he can do. We know that there's the possibility that he can, open up the field, whether that's for Jarvis or for Hooper or Njoku or any of these guys. He commands attention. So it'll be interesting. I think he may be the guy that I think if I look back now and say rank him in terms of impact, I think I'm probably gonna put OBJ at 1 and then Delpit at 2 and probably Greedy at 3.
Can see that.
That's how I would go, and it sounds funny, but I think I feel most comfortable with OBJ's health at this point.
Yeah.
Because I think it seemed like they were kind of going real slow with Delpit, at the minicamp, not letting him do too much. But I think all 3 of these guys, I think that there's kind of a question mark still remaining whether these guys are going to be ready for training camp. They're all out there in minicamp doing something. Right. But I don't think we know 100% if they're going to be ready to actually go for the season, for game 1. So I think it's really a tough call. But I mean, if I'm going OBJ and then probably Delpit and Greedy just because of the nerve damage. We really don't even know if he's going to make this comeback, I think.
I think they'll all be ready for game 1. It's just whether they're going to be able to stay healthy throughout the season. 17 games is a long.
Well, that's a big question too. I think I'm sorry to interrupt. I think the thing with Delpit is I think that they're going to. I think we're going to see a lot of 3 safeties probably out there. It could happen. So you're going to see Johnson and Harrison out there. So they'll play Redwine or they'll play JOK. Out there. Potentially, whether he's playing at one of the linebacker spots or one of the safety spots, but I think they'll work in Delpit as he's able to play too.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was going to say that. We're doing it again.
It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. John, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think when you look at all the personnel that they brought in and that depth, there was obviously a concerted effort to overhaul that defense, and for good reason. And to, not just from a linebacker standpoint, but the secondary standpoint, guys that can bring speed. It looks like we've added some ball hawking, talent to the field. And for me, and I said this on Twitter, one note about JOK is, for me, when I watch that kid play, he reminds me a lot of Eric Turner. And I love that. I can't express that enough. I mean, anybody in Brown's Twitterverse knows that I'm a Eric Turner guy. And when I watched his play, and I watch a lot of his tape, whether it's the Stanford game or some of those, you watch that and the way he explodes through people, I'm just like, yeah, he reminds me of E-Rock big. And I'm all for that. I'm all for that, because that's the thing I've always wanted on our Browns defense. Is it used to upset me that, it was bad enough that the team moved, then they go out and get a guy like Ray Lewis, or they go out and get an Ed Reed, and these guys that just would, that were intimidators. And that's what I've always wanted on the defense. And when I watch JOK, that's what I see. And so I'm really excited about this. What the potential exists with this defense. And I'm really hoping Joe Woods can utilize all of that talent efficiently when you look at that secondary and that linebacking core, and even that front line. Now, they went and got, Jadeveon Clowney, and we haven't even talked about him. And so I think there's a lot of potential here for what this defense could do. And again, it's that proverbial on paper. So we shall see, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
like I was going to say with this, the back seven is very versatile. They can play the run. They can cover. There's nothing they can't do. I mean, when you look at the back seven, if you add Delpit as like the other linebacker, the will linebacker type person, you got the Johnson, you got Harrison, you got JOK, and then you got Walker. The slowest guy there is Walker, and he's not slow. So we got speed. Every one of these guys can cover the run. They can cover the pass. They can mix and match so much. They'll think they're in dime when they're actually in like a 4-3 man or something like that, and you won't know because they're out there in dime looking exactly like that too.
Plus, as long as they don't go Romeo Crennel, UFO defense and all of that, that's good.
Yeah.
The thing is that they have enough depth,
right,
at these spots that they don't need to put a lot of pressure on these young guys either. They don't need to have JOK out there starting, right off the bat, doing all kinds of things that, and learning and knowing every assignment, for every snap of week one. They don't have to do that necessarily. They can bring these guys along. And there's enough talent around to do that.
Yep. Yeah. And you said the word right there, Rod. Look at this team. This may be the most talented Browns team I can remember. There's so much depth, which we have. I can't remember the last time we had any kind of level of depth on offense or defense, let alone both. There's actually the potential that talented players are going to get let go this year.
Yeah,
that's how much is that. Yeah, that's how much is on this roster right now, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in as we get ready for the season and who gets cut and who kind of works to the forefront with the depth chart. So this I think this is going to be a fun season. I think we're going to get to see some really interesting things take shape from a defensive standpoint. I think we already know what we're going to see offensively, but from a defensive standpoint, this is going to be, on any given week where you go, a new star pops up or somebody makes a big play. And so I think this is going to be fun.
Well, the rotation on this team on the defense side is going to be crazy because you're going to be able to rotate guys in and out, and you're not really going to lose much on talent.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to keep guys fresher, keep guys out there. Like when you see them long drives, I don't think you're going to get a lot of those long drives, but when you see them long 7-8 minute drives and the defense is just exhausted by the other drive, well, that's not going to happen because you're going to be able to rotate guys in and out there and keep them fresher.
Yep. And then not only that, I read an article, I can't remember where it was at yesterday, but I read an article where they had talked to Jadeveon Clowney and talked about now with the talent that they have in there. And of course, this is always contingent on, is everybody healthy, this type of thing. But you look at the fact that they brought in Malik Jackson and they got some of these other people. And then, of course, they brought in Takk McKinley. You may have Takk McKinley out there, Malik Jackson at one of the DT, but you may slide Garrett inside and stack him next to Jadeveon Clowney. And if you're on the left side of the offensive line and you're looking at Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, you're probably freaking out a little bit. That just kind of thing. And so, so when you look at what they're going to be able to do with the offensive line, the linebackers, the secondary, it's going to be interesting to see how they mix and match a lot of these pieces. It's kind of like, just having this puzzle and just out there toying with the offense. And that's what you want to do is keep them guessing. You want them confused. You want everybody looking like Ben Roethlisberger during the playoffs, sitting on the sideline crying.
One of my favorite images.
That would be great. Yeah. If we see a lot of that out of opposing quarterbacks this year, I think it's going to be a happy season, guys.
Sam Darnold's not going to be the only one seeing ghosts. I'm telling you. It's going to happen to all of them.
And all you got to do is look at the Super Bowl. Everybody walked into the Super Bowl. Oh, it's Tom Brady's the old guy and this, that, and the other, and yet Tampa Bay just that defensive line, it was like a track meet all game long, and Mahomes is back there running around like a chicken with his head cut off. You know, we may not
take.
necessarily see that type of performance week in or week out, but I think the ability or the potential for this defense to have that kind of impact, I think it exists. And I mean, it may take us some time to get there. We've got new faces and, you know, gel that chemistry and things like that, learning a new defense. So I think it'll take some time, but I think that, you know, the potential is there to definitely have a lot of impact on, you know, across the board on the defense.
Definitely. Yeah. So guys, we've been going for a while. You ready to wrap this thing up?
Yeah.
All right.
I got a quick shout out, Rod. I got a quick shout out. I don't know if you guys saw the news today, but I thought it was pretty cool that you know, a former Browns player, Carl Nassib, came out and said, you know, he announced that he was gay on social media, and so to have the NFL, you know, to be the first active player that's gay in the NFL. I mean, you know, and it shouldn't be newsworthy, but it is in some aspects. But it was neat to see a lot of support from, you know, not only the Browns fans, but, you know, the NFL community. And I mean, the NFL even put out a statement about it. But good for him. I mean, that's awesome that, you know, we're going down to a more all-inclusive aspect of, you know, in the sports world. And, you know, given everything that's gone on in recent years. So it was really neat to see that. So good for him. Bravo, man.
Yeah, and he donated $100,000 to, I don't remember the name of the charity, guys. I don't know if you guys do or not.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it did.
But it's the charity is for LGBT for suicide prevention. Yeah. So
good for him. Good for him.
Yeah. So I mean, he did this for all the right reasons.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't say, you know, to say, hey, look at me, you know, I want to be the poster boy for this or that, or, you know, I want attention. It was he was ready to do this for, you know, for him, and he wanted to make a positive impact, you know, for some kids that go through some tough things. So definitely a very positive thing.
And like John said, it's not something we should have to celebrate because it should be normal.
Yep.
We should just be able to accept it. We have to celebrate it now until it becomes normal, but it should just be normal. That it should just, oh yeah, who cares? He's gay. Who cares? That's how it should be. Not, oh my God, he's gay. No, it's
But, you know, guys, it's a sign of the times that things are changing, that we're actually comfortable even talking about this. Because 20, 30 years ago, you know, people would have been, oh, my God, are you kidding me? You came out and said this, you know? Now people are, you know, times have changed. Yeah. So, you know, that's the good thing, and good for him that he did this. And, you know, because he couldn't have done this 30 years ago. He would have been persecuted, and he would have been kicked out of the league, and, you know, and all this other stuff.
Well, like me and John, we joined the military in the don't ask, don't tell era.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Even though we knew, I mean, I'm sure John did. I had quite a few friends that were homosexual, but, you know, you don't talk about it on, you know.
Yep.
Now it's a great thing that we can, and it's not even. It's not mind blowing. It's like, oh, that's just good for him and good, you know. It's not. It's
all about the human. Yeah. All about the individual.
All about the human.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. Definitely. So Dave, I'll give you the floor. Any closing words for us?
Well, all I can say is if you're following me on Twitter, just be prepared to read some scary stuff. And you never know when they're going to come out. It's random. Hope you enjoy them. Buy my book, and if you really like scary stuff. And I hope to have the new book out. I'm hoping for an October release. So that's my goal right now, is an October release. So I'll keep you guys updated on that.
Excellent. John, what do you have for us?
You know, Rod, I always appreciate, you know, sitting down and talking, you know, all things Browns and, you know, some of the other topics we've touched on and, you know, in the past, obviously writing and whatnot. And I'm always humbled that you guys have me on and like to discuss stuff. I think I feel fortunate to be a part of a good community, you know, with the Twitter crew and so I'm always, fortunate in that sense. I've really tried to, and I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I've tried to be a lot more grateful about some things. I've really tried to change my approach on the Twitterverse. I think there's a lot of craziness going on right now out there, but just trying to make the best of it. And just wanted to send a quick shout out, a late Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there doing great things. And of course, we also just fell just not too long ago, a few days ago, Juneteenth, and and I posted something at that point in time that I think it's important that we continue to support and love and encourage all our our members, our brothers and sisters of the Black community that are out there that are doing great things, so I always feel fortunate and humbled to be a part of such a great group of people. So that's all I got. Go Browns! I'm excited for the season. I think we all are. So that's it. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you.
This has been the Browns Blitz. We will catch you next time.